Item 6.10 or 1:30 p.m. Item presentation and update on the current status of the Hydrilla Eradication Program activities for the Clear Lake area. And we have David Kratville and Mike Mtg who would like to speak to us.
Thank you.
Thank you
for the opportunity. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Usually not a problem with my voice, but thank you again. I'm David Kratville. I'm an environmental program manager with the California Department of Food and Agriculture. Formerly was the supervisor overseeing the Hydrilla Eradication Program. Hydrilla Eradication Program is a statewide project. The department gets roughly $2.3 million a year to conduct survey and eradication efforts for Hydrilla verticillata as the actual plant, which occurs here in Clear Lake. It is one of the few plants in the state named in the Food and Agriculture Code by name. The department is mandated to attempt to eradicate wherever it's feasible. And so the plant was found here. I guess I should back up. I've given a presentation to the Board of Supervisors, but I think all of the faces have changed since that time. So we have a number of changes happening this year, and we just wanted to take the opportunity to reach out to you and hopefully answer any questions in case the public comes to you all with questions about what we're doing out there this year. But as I was saying, so CDFA, we are mandated by Food and Ag Code Section 6048 to attempt eradication wherever feasible within the state. Clear Lake is the largest current infestation in the state. Hydrilla was found here in 1994, the year I graduated high school, and this weekend I just bought my tickets to my 30-year reunion. So that tells you how long Hydrilla's been here in this lake, and we've been working here in this lake ever since then. We do conduct statewide or lake-wide surveys. Typically in April is about when we normally start. You'll see that our airboats out there, our airboats are specifically marked with the CDFA logo on them. I understand there's a number of other pest control businesses that have airboats, but we went ahead and designated ours so that put the stickers on them so that we could identify ourselves. At any rate, we do conduct surveys most of the time on the lake when the boats are out there. Mike Mtg, who's the supervisor of the crew here, he's been with us since he's moved up here in 2013 and has ran the crew ever since then. Most of the time when the crews are out on the lake, they are conducting surveys, and you will see them throwing grappling hooks. We didn't bring one with us today. It's a small metal hook on the end of a rope, and we throw that into the water and drag it. Roughly every minute we pull it up and identify any aquatic plants that are on there. Hydrilla is a plant that roots in the sediment. It's attached to the bottom. As I'm sure all of you know, Clear Lake can be kind of hard to see through at times. It can get pretty turbid. So we utilize those grappling hooks to reach down into thick weed beds or deep down. And then the crews, there's one driver and two crew members typically throwing the hooks and doing visual surveys. So the majority of the time that our crews are out on the lake, they are doing surveys. Roughly 5 to 6 times a year, we will do herbicide applications. In recent years, our herbicide applications typically take 2 days. Sometimes we wrap them up in 1 day. Weather permitting, we might have to extend that to an additional day or follow up the following week. But the majority of the time that our staff are out there, they are doing surveys. So this year, for the first year since about 2007, we intend to do no treatments in Clear Lake for Hydrilla. We have a protocol, the previous protocol. So in 2002, we were treating over 1,400 acres in the lake. In 2003, we found 0 plants, and at that time, our protocol was to go 3 years after the last plant find, we would pull areas out of treatment. Unfortunately, that taught us a lesson because in 2008, after several years of no treatments in the lake, we had the highest number of plant finds we've ever had in the lake. At that time, we extended our protocol to 7 years. of treatment. So I should give you a little bit of biology of Hydrilla. Hydrilla is a plant that developed in parts of Africa and Asia where they tend to have monsoon rains. So there's temporary lakes form in what was otherwise a dry field in the non-monsoon times of year. So the plant, its survival strategy is to send a tuber down into the wet soil of these temporary lakes, and that tuber can sit, even in the lake can dry up, and it can sit there for 5, 6, 7 years and wait for a monsoon to refill that basin, and then the plant very quickly goes through its life cycle and sends new tubers down. You take that plant to California with our gorgeous weather and a lake like this with year-round water, and the plants they can stay happy as can be for a very, very long time. So our application technique is a slow-released, well, initially if a plant is found, we use a contact herbicide, which is copper-based, to immediately burn down the plant, biomass, so that we don't get fragmentation and additional tubers formed. And then we go into our long-term sonar. Sonar is the product name, the label name. Fluoridone is the active ingredient, and we utilize a slow-release pellet. And that's when, if you see our boats out there with a large hopper on the front and they're throwing out clay pellets, we broadcast those roughly 5 times a year, and those sit at the bottom of the lake and slowly, very slowly emit the fluoridone, which takes care of any tubers that are sprouting and beginning to grow. So we kill the plant at a very small, right at the dirt level. But as I said, this year, it's been 7 years since our last plant find was in 2016. So last year we were treating 85 acres still in 9 different areas around the lake. We did not reduce any acreage last year because the previous years were so dry, the lake level was so low. That limited our ability to conduct survey. There was hundreds of yards of shoreline that were just dry mud that we couldn't really survey, but tubers could certainly be living in there. So we did treat 85.71 acres last year, but this is the first year, like I said, since about 2007 that we're going to have no treatments. That is our intention going into the year. If we find a plant, we will have to conduct treatments. And so the confusion that I don't want to have, that I'm trying to avoid, is we are going to be sending out our normal notice of intent. Any property owner around the lake that touches the lake gets a letter from us every year that's signed by the agricultural commissioner, notice of intent of our intent to treat, and then identifies the potential products that we might use. So we are still going to send those out, and I don't want this to be confusing to the public, but initially we don't intend to have any treatments conducted this year. But that notification is, we're legally required to do that if we make an application. And if we are to find a plant, our protocol, our policy is to treat within 48 hours of finding that plant. And if we had to go through the public notification process, that would delay us quite a bit. So we're preemptively going to say that we potentially could treat, but initially at the start of the year, we do not intend to do any herbicide applications in Clear Lake this year. That's about all I wanted to say. Are there any questions for us, or do you want me to expand on any of? There's always a lot of confusion about what we're doing out there on the lake. The vast majority of the time we're just surveying. So, but the crews throwing the hooks to the layperson, it looks like someone throwing a application hose in the water. So we get lots of questions about our treatments. So
Which is good. Questions are good.
yeah, absolutely. I have nothing to hide.
I appreciate you approaching the board and letting us know the current status of Hydrilla in the lake and your plans. I want to open it up for question and comments to help guide the conversation any further. Are there any questions or comments?
I don't have any.
Supervisor Green.
I assume the plan to not treat anything is a general measure of success. That
Absolutely.
What you've seen in past years, you've kind of kept it down to a dual roar.
Yes.
That said, it's still endemic.
Yes.
So going back to your previous statement, we didn't do treatments, and then it kind of bit you in the butt. So how are you balancing that? If you're not going to do treatments this year because of a general good state of affairs, how do you know it's not biting you in the butt later?
So this is, I will say that this lake nationwide is famous for the eradication effort. It's very unique. In California, we're lucky that we're so isolated. There aren't boats coming, from the Delta with Hydrilla on it. Hydrilla doesn't exist in the Delta. So because we're able to isolate and treat, we had the opportunity to eradicate it here, and that's what we've pursued. At some point we have to stop treating. We can't, there's no reason to just continue to put pesticide in an area. We do use a tracking system. We have identified some areas that over the years had cycled in and out of treatments. We'd end treatments and a few years later we'd find a plant, and we've made some tweaks to those areas, extended the treatment time or the size of those applications to try to tackle those problem areas. But like I said, at some point we have to stop treating just because, and the protocol that we use is in line with the biology of the plant as we know it, for how long a typical tuber might last in the soil. It's typically about 5 years. And from what we've seen elsewhere in the state of when in the past when we pulled ponds out of treatment, it would usually take 3 to 4 years and we would find a plant. That has repeated itself in our history, and that's why we went to the 7-year protocol. And we've been reducing acreages 7 years after treatment for many years now, and none of those prior, nothing has popped back up. Nothing has come back into since 2016 was the last plant find. So we, for the last, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but we were reducing about 100 acres a year for 4 or 5 years there. And none of those acreages have rotated back into treatment from a plant find. So.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? So I get it that right now is a different time period because there's not hydrilla to be found, at least that you're aware of at this moment. But where would you typically find it? And would it be more on the Lakeport side where it's shallower? Would it be on the Clear Lake Oaks side where it's a little bit deeper? Or is it all over?
It's been found all over this lake. There are some portions of the shoreline that don't, that I don't think we've ever found plants, but if I brought a map of the history of the lake, it's just ringed.
Okay.
It grew everywhere. We go out to usually about 20 feet deep, more or less. That kind of changes on, like you said, like the deeper, rockier side. The type of sediment, the real fluffy, sandy or loose, loamy sediment, it really likes that. The tubers can hang out there pretty easily, and it establishes well. But it'll grow anywhere in this lake, and it will grow anywhere in the state as well. In the state of California, we have both biotypes. There's monoecious and dioecious hydrilla. We only have monoecious here in Clear Lake, but California is unique. We're good at growing stuff, including things we don't want to grow. So, but hydrilla, this lake is very, very fertile. And you take a horrible water weed like hydrilla and it just loves it. So, but it will grow anywhere in this lake.
It's very eutrophic in our lake.
Yep.
And just so the public's aware, I know I've gotten a little bit of education, but I could use a review. The type of chemicals that you do use when doing the treatment, if you can describe that.
Sure. So typically our standard, it's a two-pronged approach. When we have a plant find, we utilize a copper-based herbicide, which we would call a contact herbicide. It literally almost instantaneously breaks down the cell wall of aquatic vegetation, and that is non-selective. It just burns down all vegetation. And we do that to burn the hydrilla plant back to the root crown. The root crown is still there and it will sprout up and keep growing. But that stops any aquatic weeds spread by fragmentation. You mow your lawn and you throw the grass clippings away, it's totally fine. If you mowed hydrilla into a bunch of 3-inch sections, you would just be spreading thousands of plants. So we burn the plant down with the copper contact herbicide. And then once a plant is found, if we find a floating plant, that doesn't trigger treatment because it doesn't mean anything. It just means that fragment was floating there. I can't justify pouring chemical into a spot that something just moved through. But if we find a rooted plant, we will treat with copper. And then the minimum acreage per the label, we create a 5-acre treatment area around that. And we treat, aquatic applications are kind of different. It's not like spraying a dandelion in your lawn. You're actually, the chemical is in a liquid portion of a lake that can move around. So we do a 5-acre, per the label, we do a 5-acre treatment area around that plant find. And then that just gets into our regular rotation. And every 5 to 6 weeks, we would make fluoridone is the active ingredient that we use there. And that's a very low concentration, slow release pellet that we're lucky that Hydrilla is particularly susceptible to. But that's the two-prong approach that we utilize.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So if you've been so successful with Hydrilla, is there any way that you can work with the county to move on to the next type of aquatic weeds that we've been discussing here at our board level before?
So no, unfortunately. I do, however, oversee the
I feel like someone else has already asked this question.
the weed management area funding, and the county, the department puts out money for county weed control. So I work with Lake County on that. But no, we don't. Hydrilla, the department itself works on Hydrilla because we're mandated by the Food and Ag Code to work on that. We do give out funds for other county weed control. And I will say that my staff are constantly looking. We did find water hyacinth at one of the boat ramps, and we spent a day or two with nets getting it out of there because we know how bad water hyacinth could be. Water hyacinth, if you're not aware, is what's all over the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. And as a reference, and that's what Boating and Waterways spends millions of dollars a year trying to control water hyacinth. The state of Florida did not eradicate Hydrilla, and it has both Hydrilla and hyacinth. And they spend 4 times as much money on Hydrilla as they do on water hyacinth. And you can look at the Delta to see how bad hyacinth is. That's just a good reference on. Hydrilla is considered the world's worst weed because of its impacts to water.
Well, I'm glad of your success here to at least reduce that and mitigate the problems that it could create for us.
Yeah. And I just want everyone to know we will be here for years and years and years surveying. We're not gonna turn anytime soon. I mean, they're going to be out there looking every year. This is a huge success story if we can.
You had a little quiet hooray behind you.
Oh, of course.
For that, so thank you. And so I would suggest if there's no further comments or questions, if you can stay there just in case there's a question from the audience that we can't respond to. But I do want to open it up for public comment, and please come on up, Joan.
I'm Joan Moss, and I want to know what is bad about Hydrilla. Why do we not want Hydrilla in our waters?
Thank you.
To answer the question, Hydrilla is it is one of the fastest growing plants in the world. It can grow up to a foot in a day in extreme situations. It can grow under the light of a full moon. It's just extremely good at growing very quickly. As I said, it developed those subterranean tubers, which you can completely dry a pond out, kill every aquatic plant in it, or an irrigation ditch, and the California aqueduct, which moves water from Northern California to Southern California. And you can draw those bodies of water out and kill most every aquatic plant. When you fill that back up with water and you have hydrilla tubers present, it just says thank you for the haircut and immediately starts growing again. So what hydrilla does, a impoundment that has hydrilla in it, there's a term called acre feet, which is what you measure the storage capacity of a pond or reservoir. If you have a full monoculture of hydrilla, you will have 80% of that water body will be plant matter, and only 20% of that water body will be actual water. When you try to pump water through an irrigation system, The same thing happens. You lose 80% of the capacity to move water from one part of the state to the other. That is the reason that the department was mandated by Food and Ag Code 6048 to attempt to eradicate hydrilla wherever feasible. It is, but additionally to that, once you get that solid monoculture, there's no dissolved oxygen, there's no sunlight penetration. Hydrilla roots at the soil and it hits the surface and branches laterally, and it forms a mat at the top. It literally, nothing is growing in that pond other than hydrilla. Initially, when these weed beds start, bass fishermen, which obviously love this lake, they love to fish the edges of weed beds. So when any sort of aquatic weed comes in, initially it might provide some of that edge effect. Hydrilla very quickly is 100% takes over the water body, and there's no room for fish. There's no oxygen. It literally kills everything. It just makes black, murky, lifeless water underneath it.
Appreciate the response. Thank
Sure.
you for that. Are there any other public comments? Please come on up.
My name is Angela DePalma-Dow. I am the Lake County Aquatic Invasive Species Program Coordinator. I just wanted to provide a few items of support for this program, and thanks. It really is remarkable. So I've worked in 6 states, and throughout any training for invasive species, hydrilla is like the biggest boogeyman out there. In those 6 states I've worked in, there's been examples of non-successful management and control. When I came to Clear Lake, the fact that I heard that hydrilla was on its way to being eradicated was remarkable. So this is very significant. The fact that you guys have been doing such a great job and instilled such an aggressive treatment is fascinating and very exciting. So I'm very excited over here. So thank you guys for your program. We did work with your guys' program a few years ago to create a fact sheet for the public, because there's lots of questions. So I have some of those here available for the public. We also have them at our office. They're also online. One thing I will also want to mention is that the program staff at the Hydrilla program has been really great to work with. So you guys know water resources, we're resource constrained, we're strapped. Unfortunately, we're not on the lake every day. We can't just ride around in boats and look at what's going on the lake. And so we really depend on our partners to be some of the eyes out there, let us know what's going on. And this program has been able to do that for us. So thank you to Mike and his team. If they notice anything out in the lake, they're letting me know, they're sending pictures. If it looks like there might be a little fish kill, there's a little bit of a bloom forming, there's something weird they don't normally see, which they know because they're out there every day, they let us know right away. And that is some invaluable information that I don't know how we get elsewhere. You talked about the hyacinth watch or the hyacinth response. We had a hyacinth response that I was alerted to by Mike in a cove out in Glen Haven a few years ago. I was able to assemble a team, and we went out there in a couple days, remove the water hyacinth, and then every year we've gone back and checked. And it was in a little cove. It wasn't visible from the main lake, so even if we were out there doing our normal sampling, we would not have spotted it. But because Mike and his team was out there, they were able to do that and let us know. So really indebted to them and all the support that they've been able to do out on the lake and really help us be more efficient and effective with the funds and the resources that we have. I think that's it. Thank you so much, and to support this program.
Thank you very much. Come on up.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Childers. I'm a fisheries biologist, and I just have a simple question for you all. Does fluoridone or copper sulfate have any negative effect on native aquatic vegetation?
Native aquatic vegetation.
Yeah, and then just to move forward with that too, if it does, that could potentially decrease juvenile hitch habitat. It could reduce fitness, and it could also reduce zooplankton in the lake, which these fish actually need to eat as juveniles.
Specific to native vegetation, the copper-based herbicide is very non-selective. It will impact any vegetation in the lake. The fluoridone at the rates, I don't want to speak, I don't know exactly which plant you're talking about. As far as the hitch are concerned, the fluoridone potentially could impact any vascular plant. Fluoridone does not impact algae. It's a systemic, so it has to move through the plant. It's absorbed at one location and translocated to another location. So algae don't do that, so algae are not impacted by fluoridone. But as in regards to the hitch, we work very closely with Ben Ewing from California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Prior to particularly any copper treatment, if we were to conduct a copper treatment, we have a protocol where we contact Ben Ewing with CDFW prior to, and he will either go do surveys or let us know if there is any suspected hitch habitat in that area. To date, I don't recall that ever being an issue, but we work hand in hand with Ben Ewing prior to those applications. And he basically gives the green light that we can continue our applications. Mike, have we ever altered one because of the hitch? I don't believe we have. So,
Thank you for your response.
sure.
I see no further hands in Zoom or hands or folks coming up to the mic in the chamber. I'll bring it back to the board. Any final comments or questions? Really appreciate you coming to us and providing an update on the process and the success. And let's make sure to keep coming so that we don't have that gap like we have in the past, and so that we can continue to keep it as mitigated as possible.
Will do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.